Viewer discretion is advised.
The Sonic the Hedgehog franchise has been capturing hearts and minds ever since its release in June of 1991. Sonic's fast, frenetic, and addicting gameplay, coupled with its instantly memorable music and gorgeous pixel art aesthetic, quickly carved itself a place of fondness in the memories of millions. Add to that the character's design, from his slick silhouette to his too-cool-for-school attitude, and it should come as no surprise that even after the end of the so-called mascot platformer age, Sonic the Hedgehog remains relevant to this day, a distinction he shares only with the granddaddy of his kind, Nintendo's evergreen symbol of carefree fun, the legendary red-clad plumber, Mario. In fact, Sega itself has the Blue Blur to thank for the success of its 16-bit Genesis system, which, at its January 1992 peak, controlled 55% of the American home console market share, managing the seemingly impossible feat of beating out Nintendo's incredibly popular Super NES. Though short-lived, that victory can be attributed directly to Sonic's allure. It was only after Tom Kalinske, then president of Sega of America, convinced his Japanese counterparts to bundle in Sonic with the Genesis console that the machine took off, doing so with the speed that so characterized their little blue mascot. Sonic had delivered Sega from Nintendo's Iron Reign, and gave them the fighting chance they needed to establish the Genesis as a viable alternative to the Big N's market dominance. From the ashes of its hardware business, Sega would rise again, this time as a third-party software developer. The transition was not an easy one, resulting in the downsizing of 1/3 of its Tokyo workforce, but Sega survived this tumultuous time in its history, never forgetting their roots and the little blue hedgehog that granted them their glory days. It was this sentiment that motivated Sega to commission a game that would honor their mascot's history, right on time for his 15th birthday. However, as is so oft repeated, good intentions have a habit of leading things astray. This is the story of just one such instance. This is the story of Sonic the Hedgehog 2006. The year is 2004, and character artist Yoshinari Amaike finds himself on a small development team at Sega, working on a new game concept. The team had recently seen the power of the Havok physics engine, and were toying with an idea for a game set in a realistic world, to complement both the physics-based gameplay possibilities granted by Havok, as well as the graphical and performance capabilities of their newly received PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360 development kits. Elsewhere at Sega, late in that same year, game designer Shun Nakamura was approached by his superiors with the opportunity of a lifetime. They wanted a brand new Sonic game to celebrate their mascot's upcoming 15th anniversary, and they wanted him to act as chief game designer. Over the following months, Mr. Nakamura would be joined, among others, by two key figures from Sonic Team, Yojiro Ogawa, field artist and game designer of Sonic Adventure DX, and the father of Sonic himself, series co-creator Yuji Naka, who would act as producer for this upcoming title. Led by these men, the team would begin concepting Sonic's next outing. With E3 2005 only a couple of months away, Sega made its first demand of the team. They wanted a demonstration to show off at the upcoming trade show. The team knew that providing any kind of gameplay would be impossible with a title so early in development, so they opted to craft a tech demo, with a heavy focus not on gameplay, but on the game's aesthetic and tonal goals, to be shown to the game's media covering E3 behind closed doors. The event was a success, with the media's anticipation for the title generating interest amongst the public. But those doors weren't closed quite as tightly as Sonic Team had hoped. Soon after the show, footage of the demo leaked online, multiplying the media-fueled fan enthusiasm to enormous levels. Nothing scares an actor more than a full house on opening night, something that was beginning to look increasingly likely. Expectations amongst the public were being set, while the script's first draft was being written. Getting back to work post-E3, the team found themselves struggling in their efforts to develop Sonic 06 for Sony and Microsoft's upcoming hardware. The team had yet to receive development kits for Nintendo's newest console, the Wii. True to its codename, this new console's control method, with its emphasis on motion detection technology, was indeed nothing short of revolutionary. However, this grand leap away from the standards of the time came with its pitfalls, that of its technical limitations being most pertinent, and indeed worrying, to Sonic Team. In the months leading up to E3 2006, Sonic co-creator and producer of the Sonic 06 project, Yuji Naka, left Sega to start up his own game development studio. Sega allowed Mr. Naka to poach the 10 most experienced members of Sonic Team to help him set up his new studio. Additionally, almost as though to add insult to injury, Sega demanded a new playable demo to be available on their show floor at E3, now only a matter of weeks away. Sega seemed just as determined to ride the wave of excitement that the previous year's leaks had generated, as they were to deny anything that would have allowed the game to stand even the slimmest chance of living up to it. With their inflexible November release date closing in, there was no escaping the reality of the situation. This would not end well. On November 14th, 2006, the callboy came, the curtain lifted, and Sonic Team faced the music. Sonic 06 never stood a chance. Riddled with game-breaking bugs and glitches, it was panned universally by fans and critics alike. To understand why Sonic 06 doesn't work, we feel we must first establish context through a theoretical framework, specifically those outlined by Hall's encoder-decoder model, and Cardona-Rivera and Young's metaphor of games as conversation. The following discussion will be centered within Bogost and Monfort's platform studies model.
Through this conversation, we can infer the intentions that the developers had for the game through its cut content. This includes the day-night cycle that was introduced in the demo at the Tokyo Game Show event, but never actually appeared in the finished game itself. This is also shown through the use of half-implemented mechanics such as the stamina meter not working for the character of Sonic. These cuts can be seen as evidence of an ambitious idea whose execution did not follow through.
Sonic 06 looks to be an attempt at perfecting the gameplay formula from the Sonic Adventure series. Examples of this range from the grand scale down to the smaller details. For instance, the use of multiple characters with unique mechanics and movesets, while being an idea that originated with the expansion to Sonic 3 for the Genesis, Sonic & Knuckles, truly came into its own in the first Sonic Adventure game. I should also note that, with the exception of Big the Cat, every playable character from that game returns in Sonic 06, all playable at one point or another. Other gameplay similarities include the snowboarding and chase sequences, both being featured prominently in the adventure games. The game's narrative also shares some storytelling notes with the adventure series. Sonic 06 shares its predecessor's use of multiple converging storylines that culminate in a final campaign involving everyone working together toward a greater goal. The time travel storyline appears to be an expansion on Shadow's chaos control technique, first introduced in Sonic Adventure 2. Even the controversial decision for Sonic to have a human love interest in Princess Elise isn't unprecedented. One of the scrapped ideas from his very first game for the Genesis was for his motivation to be to rescue his human girlfriend Madonna, who was being held captive by Dr. Eggman.
There are factors that act to subvert those intentions, such as the control of the game being taken away from the player excessively, or the game giving the player a false sense of control, as exemplified by the boost pad locking you onto a fixed path, often sending the player into walls, enemies, or other obstacles, among others. The intention of the developers was not to lock the player in or out of the gameplay, but due to time constraints and a lack of manpower, they could not properly produce a game that was in line with what their original vision was. Because the game uses time travel as an integral part of its storytelling, with all the characters regularly jumping forward and backward through time, providing an in-depth summary of the game's narrative would be convoluted and time-consuming. At its essence, the story involves Dr. Eggman, the main antagonist, and his latest plot for world domination. Sonic and friends must step in to stop him, and the revelation of a greater threat forces the two sides to work together to stop it. The game uses many characters with very distinct abilities and mechanics. The game allows us to play mainly as three different characters: Sonic, Shadow, and Silver. Sonic's emphasis on speed can be seen mostly through the Mach speed segments. This relates to the intention of the character and the intention of the developers who created him. Shadow as a character is inherently slower than Sonic, which allows him to focus more on combat, and uniquely on vehicle combat. This emphasis was first introduced in the spin-off game Shadow the Hedgehog, which was released in 2005. The game also introduces a new character to the canon, Silver, whose use of telekinesis as his primary means of attack stresses the importance of physics in the gameplay, a different approach from the usual structure and mechanics of Sonic-related characters. We can see that even the platform itself dictates certain design decisions. Bogarst and Momford identify the next level as the code, which begs the question, what are some of the issues that relate directly to that level?
Well, there are quite a few to be sure. Probably the most notable of code level issues is the game's poor optimization, resulting in entire gameplay sequences dropping the frame rate into the single digits, and this issue is at its worst anytime the game has to make physics calculations. The trouble with this game is that, with how easy it is to trigger those massive frame drops, anytime that happens, the entire game slows down in proportion to the frame rate. And that's only the beginning. The game's already excessive loading times are made worse by how it seems to load the entire environment regardless of context.
As with the platform level influencing the code level, that in turn influences the next, being that of form and function. This level is the domain of the most basic design decisions, commonly enumerated by both commercial game critics as well as many in academia who are not directly associated with the greater discipline of computer science. One of this game's most prominent such decisions is that of Silver's combat mechanics, which ended up being a failed attempt at introducing a new way to play through Sonic games. But it was a failure of execution, not of intent. One of the such areas of the game that reflects this idea of form and function is the lifeless hub areas and the lack of quality in the side quests. This did not reflect the desired intention for those areas. The Sega presenter at the E3 2006 press presentation was quoted as saying they wished for those areas to feel living, and indicated that those hub areas would be essential to completing the game. The emptiness of those very areas caused a lack of direction and often confusion for the players, and at times it feels as if these characters are walking through a purgatory.
Yeah, and it seems to me obvious that those areas were meant to be both populated and integral to player progression, exemplified by the in-game store's implied importance. But there was a design decision that you found particularly puzzling, wasn't there?
That's right, the epitome of these confusing and unnecessary design choices being Tails and his new fake ring attack. This is similar to Rouge's attack method of throwing bombs, but is a very confusing design choice considering how vital actual rings are to advancing through the game.
The next level is interface, and here we'll return to the store example I brought up earlier. The entrance to the first level in the game, Wave Ocean in Sonic's campaign, is located on an inaccessible island near a pier in the hub world. There's a trail of rings leading to it, and anyone familiar with the Adventure series will recognize that as an opportunity to use the light dash technique, which allows players to zip across trails of rings in midair. However, before that technique is unlocked, the player has to locate the store and purchase the accessory that allows it in exchange for 100 rings, which they can acquire by completing a conveniently placed side quest that acts as a basic tutorial. There seems to be no attempt to convey to the player where that store is. In fact, we got lost trying to find it, didn't we?
Yeah, we did get lost trying to find the store. In fact, I think we actually got lost trying to navigate the hub world in order to find the missions as well. There was no indication as to where the player should be heading, and we were often left wandering around hoping to luck into finding the next objective.
There are too many examples of interface level issues to properly cover in depth, so we'll briefly run through a few of the more obvious offenses. These can be seen in every campaign, but in the interest of brevity, we'll use the ones in Sonic's campaign as examples. To segue from the store's upgrades to their application, the action bar on the lower right-hand side of the screen is non-functional for Sonic. It seems to have been meant as a stamina bar of sorts, covering the use of some of the buyable upgrades, but because it doesn't work, some of Sonic's techniques can be abused to skip huge portions of his levels, such as the infamous infinite jump glitch. And how Sonic controls itself deserves mention, if mainly in contrast to how they appeared in the demonstrations shown prior to the game's release. During his Mach Speed segments, any movement whatsoever of the control stick instantly causes Sonic and the camera to veer off into another direction with no buffering or smoothing, making those segments feel squirrely to say the least. And that's before mention of the rampant collision detection issues that plague those segments. Additionally, at the end of Sonic's homing attack, he's dropped immediately to the ground, which the player often can't see due to how closely the camera follows Sonic, regardless of his speed. None of these issues are present in either the 2005 Tokyo Game Show presentation, nor in the 2006 Xbox Live public demo, where both Sonic and the camera behave radically differently, and that behavior appears to be much more polished. As we previously mentioned, the game was meant to portray Sonic and friends in a realistic human world, and while the pre-rendered CGI cutscenes are of excellent quality, the visual dissonance between Sonic's cartoonish proportions and realistically modeled humans creates an odd clash of art styles, aggravated further by contrasting the beautiful CGI work to the in-engine cutscenes that often follow. Overall, between the game's performance issues, its ill-informed design decisions hinging on factors that were either broken in their execution, if not missing altogether, its frustrating controls, confusing story, and inconsistent art direction, Sega and Sonic Team's intended magnum opus read to us like a half-finished penny awful. To call on the conversational metaphor one last time, if not for our analysis, deciphering what Sonic 06 was trying to say at all would have seemed an impossible task, and we would likely have bowed out within the first hour.